Dive into the back end of a modern enterprise data lake, and you will not find fully formed human identities. Instead, you find a dark space populated by isolated fragments, strings of text, and solitary contact points floating in a void. The ideal scenario for data collection is a structured, one-shot form. A user signs up, provides their full details at once, and agrees to a specific linked purpose. Operational reality rarely looks like that. Organizations slowly accumulate individual data elements, pulling fragments from service requests, from partial logins, and background analytics. These individual fragments technically qualify as personal data identifiers. However, at the exact moment a system ingests them, they do not inherently belong to a specific identifiable data principal. The gap between structured intake forms and this scattered accumulation creates the core architectural challenge of modern privacy compliance. Consider a single identifier, like a name, arriving in isolation within a database. The immediate instinct of a database is operational efficiency. If the system already holds a profile with that name, it wants to automatically attach the new data fragment to the existing user. Allowing systems to execute this instinct introduces severe compliance risk. Prematurely attaching a lone identifier to an established data fiduciary profile creates a high probability of systemic mismatch. Legally speaking, a single piece of available data cannot cross the threshold of protected identity. Standing alone, a name is a guess, not a person. To eliminate this vulnerability, systems architects deploy what is known as the multi-layered architecture of personal data identification. In a database, identity is not an inherent trait of a piece of information. It is a probabilistic threshold that must be mathematically crossed before the law recognizes it. The primary defensive protocol against mismatch risk is programmed patience. Systems must be forced to wait for parameter accumulation. Two parameters represent the minimum effort to create an identity, but they carry a lingering risk of mismatch. A name and a shared email address don't yet distinguish between two individuals in the same household or professional network. Moving to a three-parameter baseline, name, email, and phone, provides the necessary cross-verification to reach reasonable certainty. This third node acts as a tiebreaker, separating a specific individual from any similar data principals and mathematically locking the identity into place. These three parameters must be independently verifiable, yet securely linked to the exact same entity within the system logic. Until this specific three-node threshold is crossed, the data remains legally unanchored to protect against potential misidentification. Without relying on highly specialized data, the three-parameter rule stands as the baseline architectural requirement to establish reasonable certainty of a user's identity. There is exactly one mathematical exception to the three-parameter rule: the presence of biometric information. A verified fingerprint record introduces an element of physical reality into the database schema. The same principle applies to facial photographs, voice samples, and DNA sequencing. Because biometrics carry significantly higher fidelity, the mathematical threshold drops. A single biometric node paired with just one standard node, like a name, instantly locks the identity matrix. This exception leads to a common engineering misconception. System architects frequently attempt to use unique government IDs as pseudo-biometrics. The ODR number is the prime example. Despite its branding, it is routinely and incorrectly treated as an identifier capable of bypassing the standard threshold. The permanent account number, or PAN card, is the second most common identifier engineers misuse in this way. Due to the current state of infrastructure in India, these government IDs lack the required reliability. They do not carry the mathematical weight needed to legally bypass the three-parameter rule. Systems architects must maintain their threshold logic for government IDs. In the absence of raw, verified biometrics, the three-parameter matrix remains mandatory. Once the parameter threshold is successfully met, the architecture must structure this identity into two distinct layers to finalize the profile. Level 1 is the operational identifier. This is the operational presence, like a specific name, assigned directly by the data principal, the user. Level 2 is the organizational identity. This is the employee ID or customer ID, generated and assigned exclusively by the data fiduciary. Simply possessing both of these identifiers independently within the same database does not automatically form a legally protected identity. The two pillars must be connected by a targeted mechanism, a bond of confirmation. The mechanics require a request signal sent from one identifier layer met by an explicit acceptance signal returned by the other. Legal identity within an enterprise system is never assigned by a unilateral database command. It requires a negotiated bilateral handshake. The completed handshake between Level 1 and Level 2 finalizes the underlying identity core, locking it with reasonable legal certainty. Only at this precise structural stage can an organization safely append high-stakes secondary payloads to the profile, starting with financial behavior and credit reporting. Health records and intensive behavioral profiles can now be attached directly to this verified core matrix. By linking this sensitive secondary information to the verified identity, the entire combined dataset undergoes a legal state change. This aggregate structure now crosses the final threshold. It officially constitutes personal data, immediately triggering strict shielding mandates under data protection law. The legal protection of an individual's most sensitive data depends entirely on the mathematical and structural integrity of that underlying identifier handshake. Raw enterprise data enters the system as orphaned fragments, vulnerable to mismatch. To secure it, systems architects force this data into a rigid structural lattice. Navigating this vulnerability relies on threshold rules, the 3 standard parameter lock or the specific biometric exception. Bypassing these rules with unreliable government IDs creates an identity profile that fails to meet legal and technical requirements for certainty. The final safeguard is the bilateral bond of confirmation, securely bridging the operational and organizational identities. For modern systems engineers, data privacy has become a multi-layered logic gate built into the very foundation of the database schema.